So this is Nick Litterswick, the CEO of UGE. And just off the top, of course, we're living in a bit of a different world this year. So on the one hand, please forgive us for any technical difficulties on the web presentation here. But on the other hand, I'm really glad that so many of you could join who may have not otherwise been able to join if this meeting was held in person. So thank you very much. Just a couple notes off the top. So the first one is that in this webinar platform, if you do have a question, just enter it on the left-hand side there, and we'll have a Q&A at the end of the meeting. And then number two, in terms of the structure of the call today, so what we're going to do is first we're going to go through a short presentation, which really just summarizes some of the key updates that UGE has had really since the beginning of 2019. So pretty high level on the one hand, but the company has really changed in terms of who we are today as opposed to the beginning of 2019. And of course, this annual general meeting is technically for the 2019 calendar year. So we just wanted to run through some of those high-level updates. So we'll run through this presentation, which we expect to take about 10 minutes. And then at the end of the presentation, we will officially call the meeting to order, and we will go through the Scrutineer's report and the ballots, and then conclude the meeting. Just before we conclude it, we will have time for any questions that anybody has. So with that, I'll run through the presentation here. So the structure, number one, is that we're just going through the milestones and industry updates over the time period that I mentioned, so really over the last almost 2 years now. And then we'll go through a quick update in terms of the company initiatives, where we are going from here and what we are focused on here today, before going into the procedural matters that we mentioned earlier. So first, in terms of the company, like I said off the top, who we are today is quite a bit different than who we were at the beginning of 2019. So the biggest aspect of this is the pivot the company made, which, a lot of our revenue in, let's say, 2018 was what we call EPC, which is providing services for other solar developers. And we made the strategic pivot in late 2018 to focus on being a turnkey developer. And so when we look at ourselves today, that is exactly who we are. So we only build projects that we're developing ourselves, and seeing the benefits from making that change. Making that change also decreased our operating expenses by almost 50%. So on average, about $5.5 million down to about $2.8 million. So of course, that's going to yield better results over time and provide us a better opportunity to generate larger profits with a lower overhead cost as well. And we also settled liabilities from that wound down business unit at a pretty steep discount, most of which hasn't shown up on our income statement and balance sheet yet, but is in the process of flowing down to the financial statements. We expect that to occur through the end of this year. We also started financing our first build, own, operate projects, which is, of course, the result of the pivot that we made. We started financing our first projects in late 2019, and then just in terms of how long the projects take to build out, the first ones have been turned on this quarter that we're currently in, so Q3. So we'll start seeing that show up in increased recurring revenues and also on the balance sheet as those projects turn into assets on the balance sheet as well. Anyone who's looked at both in the investor presentation and in our quarterly MD&A, in those presentations, you can see the total backlog with quite a bit of granularity. And currently, we expect that our backlog already has about $10 million of long-term recurring revenue once those projects are built. And when we say long-term, most of those contracts are for 25 years, often with options to extend beyond the 25 years as well. So, that's really, I'll come back to this in the initiatives, but a real focus of ours in terms of building up that recurring revenue over time. And then lastly, in terms of our gross margins, since that pivot, they've been about 3x where they were before. So from a very low double digits percent that we were at 10% in 2018, since the pivot, we've been averaging in the 30% mark. So very happy for the increased margins, and as the revenue increases, as these projects are deployed, again, I think this all is coming together for us to generate very good returns over time. The only other thing I'll say on this slide is that the graph in the bottom right, just to explain it, what we're really saying here is that like not all revenue is created equal in this industry. What we say is EPC contract only as that services business. That is where most of our revenue was before we made the pivot. And then the far right, when we actually develop, build, own, operate, is the revenue and margins. Margins being the dark green part from that business model. So we're optimistic in terms of the better returns this business will have for us. Now, second, in terms of market expansion, now number one is that we identified a change in policy in Maine in 2019, and at the beginning of 2019, this wasn't a market for us at all. But anyone who's been following our news releases knows that we've had some really good wins there, and really seeing that as one of our key parts of the Northeast U.S. market. So excited for that. Earlier this week, we actually announced 2 new projects there, which had a combined value of over 21 million US. So we're quite excited about adding that market within our Northeast US market. And that's on top of the strength we've seen in the Northeast US, which of course includes our New York market, which is really the core of that, and also the Philippines, which is our overseas market right now, and one that's doing quite well too. When we look at the gross numbers, so at 1/1/2019, our backlog was 26 million. Part of that was the remaining EPC revenue that we had. So we completed that throughout 2019 and got that off our books. Our backlog was 83 million on June 30th of this year, but then we have had some recent announcements as well, which put that total over 100 million. So we're really excited about the traction we're getting in the market and how people are seeing the attractiveness of the solutions that we're offering in this industry and how that's trickling down to the backlog. And then lastly, just in terms of the industry momentum, so we're within an industry which is growing really, really well, and one that we expect to continue to grow well going forward for many years here. So number one is that, our own costs within the industry have declined quite substantially as we've increased our volumes, as we've driven down our costs. And this is one aspect of why our margins are increasing, but also is an aspect of broadening our addressable market as well. So our director of procurement did some analysis for us in terms of the change in costs. So from the beginning of 2019, the New York rooftop costs, deploying projects in that market declined by over 11%. And then our overseas Philippines market, they've declined over 14%. So, all quite positive. And then number two is in terms of the community solar market. So we were the first commercial solar company to develop a community solar project in New York City. That was about exactly 3 years ago as we announced that first project. So New York was one of the newer markets for community solar. Since then, Maine, that was the change in the regulatory environment here, and so we are quite excited for Maine to come online, and so we've seen some really good growth there as well. New Jersey and Connecticut both have pilot programs that we're watching closely and hopefully partaking in as well. And there's quite a bit of talk elsewhere about additional potential opportunities. And the reason this is so important is that community solar really allows us to kind of decouple the site, the host where the project is being built, and who's off taking that energy. And just one of the reasons why that's so important is that a lot of times real estate owners are not the tenants in the building, and in fact that's the case over 90% of the time. So if we can decouple that formula, it really allows us to increase the size of our addressable market really substantially. And so we're excited for that wave, which is one of the reasons why our backlog's been growing so quickly of late. So now, just in terms of our current initiatives, we have 3 slides to go through here. Number one is that we're very, very focused first and foremost on the execution. So our pipeline is over 200 million as reported in our last MD&A. So we're focused on converting that into backlog, and even more so converting this large and growing backlog of ours into operational projects. Generally, we see our backlog as about a 24-month endeavor to execute on that backlog. And so, our team's very busy installing projects, getting ready to install projects, working projects through the development cycle, which we really think about as getting the regulatory approvals and the permits and things like that. So we're, first and foremost, very focused on the execution there. As that happens, we're going to see a significant increase in our recurring revenue, and so that's something to really watch for UGE over the next couple of years. And then the last one is that with our volumes increasing quite substantially, we see us being able to continue to drive down our costs of project deployment, including the cost of capital that's used to lever up those projects, and so that'll potentially lead to increasing margins as well. In terms of expansion, so again, first and foremost, in the markets that we are currently in, we see vast growth opportunities just within the states of New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Maine, the Philippines market of ours. So we see a lot of opportunity for growth just within these markets, and really feel it's a sort of tip of the iceberg type of opportunity for us. But in addition to that, the neighboring U.S. states, there's interesting regulatory discussions happening in several states. Just to name a few, Virginia, Pennsylvania, and some others in our Northeast corridor here as well. So we're watching that and going to methodically look to expand what we do over time. And then, more broadly, there is potential regulatory changes on the horizon that could provide additional tailwinds for us as well. One aspect is the tax credit in the U.S. and there's potential, there's discussions and some proposals for things like that to be improved. So we're watching all of that, which could only help our expansion further as well. And then lastly, communicate. So I would personally describe us as being a bit under the radar, especially through this turnaround. We've just been very, very focused on the business and making sure that the business is safe, sound, strong for the future here. But we want to make sure that we get the word out, and we've been doing, I think, a better job of that more recently to communicate the new UGE and where we are today. So, we really believe that our current backlog, never mind the additional growth on top of that, has quite significant value in addition to where our market cap is today. And I'll come back to this in one slide, but we're working with a group called Sophic Capital to help us communicate the message, and their website has great information on their research into UGE and their analysis of the backlog and things like that as well. And I'd be remiss not to say that for all our shareholders, we're really happy to see the shareholder appreciation recently, and we hope that that's a sign of things to come as we continue to execute here. So with that, I just briefly here in terms of questions and contact information, my information, our CFO's information's on here, and then also Sophic Capital's information's on the right-hand side there as well. It doesn't specifically say their website, but of course it would be sophiccapital.com. So with that, what we're going to do is we're going to now go into the official aspects of the meetings. So myself and the secretary of the corporate secretary of the company, Robert Van Duynhoven, will go through this aspect. And if you do have any questions, by the way, number one, of course, is you can reach out anytime after the fact, but you can also enter questions into the Q&A, and we will answer those questions before we adjourn the meeting. So with that, we'll kick this off. So, of course, my name is Nicholas Litterswick, and I'm the CEO of the corporation. This annual general and special meeting of the shareholders of UGE will now come to order. In accordance with the bylaws of the corporation, I shall preside as chairman of the meeting, and Robert Van Duynhoven, our corporate secretary, will act as secretary of the meeting. First, in terms of appointment of the scrutineer, I hereby appoint Dennis Dang of the TSX Trust Company as the scrutineer for purposes of this meeting. There has been filed with me by the scrutineer of the meeting proof of mailing of the notice of this meeting and the accompanying documents. I direct that the affidavit of mailing of the notice of this meeting and accompanying documents be annexed to the minutes of this meeting as Schedule A. With the consent of the meeting, we will dispense with the reading of the notice. The scrutineer advises me that the requisite quorum of shareholders is present, and I declare that this meeting is properly constituted for the transacting of business. I have received the scrutineer's report on attendance and direct that it be annexed to the minutes of this meeting as Schedule B. In accordance to expedite the voting on the matters to come before this meeting, the Business Corporations Act of Ontario and the bylaws of the corporation permit voting on all matters to take place by saying aye unless a shareholder or proxy holder demands that a ballot be conducted on any motion. And I'll say too here that given the nature of this, we'll just use the Q&A forum. I won't unmute everyone, which might be a bit unwieldy, but if anybody at any point in time wants to address some aspect of the voting, please feel free to do that, and we're watching just to make sure that in case any questions come up. Now, I know that the financial statements of the corporation for the year ended December 31st, 2019, and the auditor's report thereon, together with management's discussion and analysis for that period, were distributed electronically to shareholders of the corporation, along with management's information circular dated August 19th, 2020, and such materials are available on www.sedar.com under the corporation's profile, as well as on the company's website. We will now proceed with the election of directors for the ensuing year. Robert Van Duynhoven will now read the names of the persons listed in the information circular who have been proposed for election as directors for the coming year, each of whom has agreed to serve as director if elected.
All right. I nominate Stephen Bloom, Yang Bao-Shin, Peter Van Egmond Rosbach, Kristaps Ronka, Nicholas Litterswick, Jan Yang, Shangrong Shi for election as directors of the corporation to hold office until the close of the next annual meeting of shareholders or until their successors are elected or appointed.
Great. Thank you very much, Robert. May I have the nomination seconded?
I second the motion.
And is that Marcel Valentine?
This is Marcel Valentine. I second the motion.
Great. Thanks, Marcel. Robert Van Duynhoven will now move the confirming resolution.
Be it resolved that Stephen Blum, Yang Bao-Shin, Peter Van Egmond Rosbach, Kristaps Ronka, Nicholas Litterswick, John Yang, and Shangrong Shi be and they are hereby elected as directors of the corporation to hold office until the close of the next annual meeting of shareholders or until their successors are elected or appointed.
Great. Thanks, Robert. May I have the resolution seconded?
I, Marcel Valentine, second the motion.
Thanks, Marcel. I now put the resolutions to the meeting. Sorry. Although we are electing directors on an individual basis, in the interest of time, rather than list all the nominees, I would ask that anyone withholding their vote for any of the proposed nominees, please say or type so at this time. And of course, given the webinar format, I just ask that you type as much in the Q&A if you have any reservations. I will then ask each of you who are withholding for the name, and we will have the secretary note it. If a shareholder or proxy holder does not say it, I will be assumed that they are voting for all of the proposed nominees. If any are withholding, please feel free to type as much. Thank you very much. The next item of business is the appointment of auditors for the current year and authorizing the directors to fix their remuneration. I would ask someone to move the resolution appointing the auditors for the current year.
Yeah, Robert Van Duynhoven, I'll move it. Be it resolved that MNP LLP Chartered Accountants, licensed public accountants, be and they are hereby appointed auditors of the corporation to hold office until the close of the next annual meeting of shareholders or until their successors are elected or appointed, and that the directors are authorized to fix their remuneration.
May I have the resolution seconded?
I, Marcel Valentine, second the motion.
Thanks, Marcel. I now put the resolution to the meeting. All those in favor of the resolution, please, we'll assume that you're in support or feel free to type so as well. And of course, if anyone would like to withhold their vote, please feel free to type as much. Thank you. I also note that a majority shares have been voted in favor pursuant to the Scrutineer's report. I declare the resolution carried. We will now proceed with the next matter of business, being annual approval of the corporation's incentive stock option plan. Robert, I'll ask that you move that.
Yes. Be it resolved that the corporation's stock option plan, as further described in the Management Information Circular dated August 19th, 2020, is hereby reapproved.
May I have someone second this resolution?
I, Marcel Valentine, second the motion.
Thanks, Marcel. I now put the resolution to the meeting. All those in favor of the resolution, please do so by either not withholding your vote or typing that you approve. And for that matter, if any withhold, please feel free to type as much as well. All right. Thank you. I also note that a majority shares have been voted in favor pursuant to the scrutineer's report. I declare the resolution carried. Now, if there's any further business, I see some questions coming in, so I'll treat those under the further business. And if anyone has anything else they would like addressed, now's a good opportunity to type as much. And so there's a few questions that have come in, so I'll go through them and answer here. Let's see here. So the first question is the recent project announcement, which had it was actually two projects for present value of 21.5 million. Was that in the 83 million disclosed in the Q2 financials as our backlog at that time? And so the answer to that is no. So those are in addition to the backlog. So you'd expect that with those two combined, the backlog would now be over the $100 million mark. So we're very pleased to see that growth this year. All right, one other question here. Now there's a question about the recurring revenue and in essence, like how will that grow? So the way I would think about it, so in that backlog table that's in our MD&A, and then from the MD&A, we include it in the investor presentation as well, which we regularly update about once per month on our website, ugi.com /investors. So the table as of June 30th, we projected that our backlog as currently confirmed would yield 8.6 million in recurring revenue once the projects were built. That's before the additional projects, which added somewhere in the range of 2 million. So, roughly speaking, now you might be thinking about 10.5 million or so of recurring revenue. And in terms of the timing, we typically think about our backlog as a 24-month build out. So over the 24 months, recurring revenue would start prior to the end of that time period and sort of build up like a layered cake. And so, thinking out 2 years from now, that's currently what we expect. Of course, we're working to secure additional projects every day as well. Very good. So thank you for those questions. And I don't have any other questions at this moment, but as mentioned on this slide here, anytime that anyone wants to reach out, we always love to hear from you. If there's no other further business, then that concludes the business of this annual general meeting of shareholders of UGE International Limited. The corporate secretary will now move the final resolution.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the meeting be concluded.
Thanks, Robert. May I have the resolution seconded?
I, Marcel Valentine, second the motion.
Great, thanks, Marcel. I now declare the motion carried and the meeting concluded. So thank you everyone again for joining today. I really appreciate it. We all really appreciate it. And reach out anytime. Appreciate everyone's support, and we look forward to hearing from you all again soon. I will now conclude the meeting.